Hello and welcome to my Module 6 reflection video. The first piece of content that we touched on was Chapter 2, The Transformation of Urban America, which was from the cities in the third wave. A section of note within this article was that it talked on the expansion of the U.S.'s primary cities, and more specifically on Chicago. For this, I'm just kind of always interested in sections on the city due to growing up outside of it, and then also seeing it allowed me to recall those prior readings that we had done in those past modules that highlighted the timeline of Chicago's development and then the crucial role that it played in that cross-country trade and the farmland supply due to being located in the Midwest. Another section highlighted the growth and the change in transportation methods in cities and explaining how first cities utilize steam, which is generated more cheaply in large quantities and it must be used close to where it's produced, and how steam kind of fostered a compact city. I highlighted that compact and close-knit city development that we see in those early stages, and it kind of foils the current highway and airport systems that we see today that are used more frequently in travel in and out of modern cities. Further on this reading, there's figure 2.6. It talked on the different metropolitan development patterns, which included kind of that concentric, multi-nucleus network patterns, which were also highlighted in our prior modules, which was really interesting. And then finally, some of those ending sections touch on the specialization of particular cities in different products and jobs, highlighting on that growth and strength in tech in Austin, Texas. It kind of prompted me to think about how optimization of this in our future cities could be beneficial, and how it kind of also made me wonder if current future city planning and development doesn't really address this in terms of understanding what its cities kind of flourish in, and kind of just instead seeks to reach kind of like a stereotype or reach that ideal image. If like the kind of that idea is being used and is potentially harming our current city development. The next section was revisiting the social life of small urban spaces. Plaza Life Revisited applies new technology to public spaces. The text statements regarding William H. White's opinion on public space and plaza design and its inability to hold up over time was definitely interesting. It explains that, quote, analysis shows a huge surge of devices. People are in public spaces to be around other people, but not watching other people. And it kind of reminded me of a past idea we had in our prior modules, which talked on those mental impacts of both city life and technology, with the development of advertisements on kind of every inch of the city, a steep increase in populations within those cities, and then the vehicles needed for it, and the stress and pace of life all kind of have those impacts on that plaza and public space relationships. And I kind of feel like in earlier years within those cities, mental stimulus was maybe a little bit lower, and public space appreciation was definitely easier. But on the contrary, it makes us wonder if, due to that increase in stimulus, why aren't these parks kind of being utilized for more of a space to detach from that technology and kind of experience that solitude? And why are we still kind of so invested within our devices, even in those spaces? And then at the end, those different models that displayed how humans disperse and like sit and stand and lounge based on that environment was really interesting to me, and prompted me to kind of think on how designers utilize these patterns when making these design choices, like using a sloped area to kind of prompt visitors to do that kind of lizarding technique, or just the other techniques that were described in those modules. The next section was the Geography of the Future Crash Course Geography video. The idea that there isn't just like kind of a physical space, but there's also that more modern introduction of a virtual space was really interesting, and kind of talked how it impacts our idea or perception of time was something of note to me. This, alongside the talks on slow cities that is discussed later on in the video, was cool, and it connects to the idea that I've talked about prior in the reflection, but also within these past modules that we've seen. Then that discussion on surveillance and its impact on data collection was another relevant, interesting idea. It reminded me of the concerns that I've seen recently on social media regarding flock camera installation across the U.S., and then just overall the concern regarding that the sharp increase in surveillance across our country. The next video was Thomas Sanchez, How Are Urban Planners Using AI or Artificial Intelligence? This video kind of aided in reminding me of the impact that technology does have on city development, with its usefulness in monitoring and optimizing it. I feel like it kind of that data and information it can grab on how we function is as ample as it will get. And I kind of feel like this video did well in highlighting how the positive aspects of this tech and AI development are seen, but I felt it maybe could have failed to address how this increased technology usage will impact those living within these spaces, and it kind of failed to separate that data and numbers from like life and imperfection and the day-to-day differences from just concrete specific data. And then the next video was that longer lecture talking on the Ghost Road by Anthony Townsend. That talk of self-driving cars or cyber chairs was interesting to me, as these are kind of options in technology that are being implemented or researched to reduce the strain on humans and optimize time. However, I kind of feel like it fails to address environmental or health impacts. Like, for example, even if humans don't have to drive their cars anymore, is having multiple people within a train car as opposed to multiple people spread out between each of their autonomous cars, is that just not a greater form of optimization? And then additionally, that section that touched on the purchasing of people or buildings by people, like Travis Kalanick, for ghost kitchens or other online or internet only purposes, was interesting to me, as I felt it kind of helped me wonder about the increase in the occupation of these physical buildings for uses that are solely online, and how this could potentially kind of connect to those concerns in the housing shortage or reduction of common or public spaces that we've talked about before. And then finally, that section that touched on the expansion and dispersal alongside each of its uses and purposes interested me, with it explaining that spread from the core to fulfillment zone, microsprawl, and desicota. It's really cool to learn about these new terms and see an expansion model kind of different from the ones we discussed prior, but with more of a focus on like humans and vehicles and for that expansion regard. And then last couple videos, I looked at transforming cities AI for human-centered future. The idea of training or manipulating AI is a concept that's discussed in this video, and it's both interesting and something I kind of hope to further educate myself in. A primary concern and reasoning for my restriction in AI use is its inability to think and design like us humans. And I feel like this was kind of displayed earlier in those images where it failed to generate those realistic images off those like 3 or 4 words, and she kind of explained it almost looked like movie sets. And it just kind of made me wonder if the shaping and teaching and manipulating of the AI to be more efficient and the time and effort that you kind of put into this is plausible and efficient, or if kind of that hands-on and personal research into effective designs in public spaces would be more practical. And then finally, I looked into Mon Uncle, what makes this movie great. I chose this video just because I've always had a kind of an interest in movies and film, and then especially the roles in discussing themes or ideas of the times and how they can be utilized to make a statement. I think it's analyzing on how absurdity is discussed in this movie was definitely interesting, and then that contrast and symbolism that it's used to create a divide between old and new is really cool. And then overall, those discussions on quaintness and modernism in the film, and that's kind of further to discuss within that review, kind of beg us to think about how these themes are kind of present in our modern lives, and then how they're particularly present in those modern cities and technology that we've been kind of talking about throughout this course. So thank you.